Okay, today I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Shayler, who is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting voices in the sustainability sphere. Mark runs his own consultancy, Ape, which has worked with almost every big brand you can think of and has written three books. Most recently, You Can't Make Money from a Dead Planet, The Sustainable Method for Driving Profits. Thank you for joining us today, Mark.
It's a joy, honestly. It's never a chore when you're talking with someone you've known on and off for years about the things that really matter and a gentle level of urgency. I think it's really important.
Fantastic. Shall we go back to the beginning then? When did you first get started in sustainability?
That's a good question, and trying to find the end of that particular ball of wool is a challenge. I could go to university, which is when I did my environmental science degree in '88, but I'm going to go beyond that. I imagine it was like 1977. I was 9, and we had to do a project, and I'd never done a project before. So think of it like a kind of dissertation for primary school kids. And I said to my dad, I've got to do a project. And he says, well, what do you want to do it on? I said, I don't know. And he said, well, have you heard of Greenpeace? And I said, no. And he said, well, they're an organization set up to help save the whale, which is where their focus was at the time. And he showed me some photographs of the Rainbow Warrior, people diving in front of ships, whaling ships and harpoons. And I just thought it was the most swashbuckling, piratey, and I know real pirates aren't nice, and I know that, but piratey thing I'd seen. And I thought, yeah, that'd be brilliant. I'll get loads of points for originality because no one will do that. So I wrote to Greenpeace, explained what I was doing, and they wrote back and they sent me so much stuff. A bit of an overwhelm for a 9-year-old, if I'm honest. And I delivered the project, and I didn't get a good mark for originality, but I got 54 out of 100 overall, which I thought was fine. And at that point, I stayed on their mailing list, and it's that native Cree verse, isn't it? That only when the last fish has been eaten, when the last river is dead, and when the last tree has been cut down, will we realize that we can't eat money.
Yeah.
And that was where the seed was truly planted, age 9, aided by the fact that I couldn't decide whether to do science, art, or humanities. So I did one of each. That kind of leads you back into the kind of science of geography. So
Yeah.
that's where my love came from.
Yeah, and you can see the thread from that quote to the book title, which we will come to in a bit. So
Yeah.
then you went on to study at university, but what was your first green job?
Okay, my first green job. So straight out of university, I went into research I was researching I was doing a piece of research for Leeds University on ozone depletion, and I guess you'd call us consumer, but public attitudes towards ozone depletion. This was post Vienna and post Montreal Protocol, so we'd made some great leaps forward here. But this public understanding of science was where it was rooted. We talked about ozone depletion and we talked about CFCs, and we knew that our deodorant was changing. The people that led that study, they were really interested in whether we understood why everything had changed. So I did a year-long project on that. And then so that was a green job, but that was very much research based. And then from there, I was really lucky. I got my big break was working with Bradford Council as a business support officer
Mhm.
in the economic development unit, but only focusing on sustainability. So this was would have been 93, 94,
Yeah.
90, yeah, 93. And so this was really forward thinking, like no one had done this before.
Mhm.
We had a green business club. There were 4, I think, in the country. Bradford's was like the largest, and we grew it and grew it and grew it. So I had this amazing kind of like 6-year apprenticeship where I was just driving around Bradford and Leeds, visiting small businesses and working out how they could kind of reduce their impact. And you would never get in the door on, I'm going to help you become greener.
Yeah.
You would get in the door on, I'm going to help you save money, or I'm going to help you stay relevant. So or I'm going to help you meet legislation was a massive driver back then.
Yeah.
So that was my first green job. And it's probably my best boss and probably my favorite job in many ways.
Yeah. That's I later did EnviroWise work, and I just liked the fact that I was going into a different business every time. You know, it was anything from porta cabins to shampoo manufacturer. It's quite extraordinary what the breadth of knowledge you get from jobs like that.
It's exactly that. And
Yeah.
if I think about it, so maybe we met there actually, you know.
Yeah.
If I think about it, it's kind of like, without knowing it, it was the perfect training to become a consultant. Go in, diagnose, assist, leave, and I can solve problems really quickly, which is never the greatest business model, if I'm honest with you. But that, I think, is all down to that, and then the EnviroWise work that I did for 8 years, 9 years
Yeah.
later on.
And then you moved to Asda, according to.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, so from that local authority job, I had a little dalliance into consultancy, which I really did not enjoy at all. And then Asda came knocking. They'd gone through a couple of environmental managers and were looking to replace or for another one. And I'd done a big piece of work with them on packaging and design, and how we could kind of design all the stuff that we do now normally, how we design out unnecessary layers, how we remove materials that aren't particularly good or we don't have a system to treat them. So I'd done that, and then they came knocking and said, would you come and join as environmental manager? And you know, it's the kind of like the big job. You think it's the defining job, and of course getting the job is just the beginning.
Yeah.
And so I took this big job, profile wise. It's a nightmare socially. Every time you went out and someone asked you what you did, and you would tell them, this was in the days when they only had one member of staff working on sustainability, I would be confronted with loads of issues around packaging, or why had that store being built there. I kind of became this social spokesperson for an organization. So I hated it. I forgot. We stopped telling everyone what I did in the end. But I ended up being put into a team that was exactly the wrong team. So got put into the PR team. So my boss was the head of PR, and she was really good at PR.
Yeah.
She was really a really shit manager. I mean, like a bully. It was bad. And I had this amazing year that I loved. On one hand, I learned loads. And again, I would be doing a contaminated land one day. I'd be looking at sustainable urban drainage the next day. Then I'd be looking at packaging. And I was never in the office. I was always out in store, which I think is exactly what that role should entail. My boss thought I should be seen and be visible and be giving out messages of what we were doing, rather than actually doing what we were doing. So there was fundamentally a clash, driven by the fact that organizationally, at that time, my role was either in corporate governance, so with the lawyers, or in PR, whereas it really needed to be in operations. And so I did that for a year, just over a year. And it got to the point that I worked out that I hadn't seen my kids awake, apart from at weekends, for the best part of 12 months.
Right.
And I thought, that's not why I had kids. That's not what this is all about.
Yeah.
So I resigned and with the plan of emigrating, but that didn't work.
And was your first consultancy you set up then, was it? The design?
Yeah. So exactly that. Yeah. So I moved back down to the Midlands, where I was from, and where my wife's from, where our parents were. And I was going to do a PhD and then move to New Zealand, but for many and complex reasons, we didn't go. And so when you're in that position, Gav, you've got to scramble, right? You've got no money. Sold my house in Bradford, so I've got some money in the bank, but I needed to buy another house at some point. Got 3 kids. We were about to have our 4th, and I needed to earn. So the fastest way of earning money is becoming a consultant. And I only meant to do it for 3 months, and that was 23 years ago, and I'm still doing it. It's been an interesting ride.
So, but that wasn't Ape, that was Eco 3. So, what was the reasoning behind going to setting up a new consultancy?
So initially, I went self-employed as me, which is essentially Ape. But I became acutely aware that there was an opportunity, specifically in eco design and design thinking. And this is long before the double diamond and long before all that stuff. And I was really good friends with a guy who was working at Sheffield Hallam, a spin-off consultancy called Proactus, a guy called Lee Holloway. And Lee was looking to move out of the university kind of trading arm and into something else. And we got on really well. We still do. And so we said, let's just put a proposal in to do some work together. Let's put a bid in to the Learning and Skills Council to look at the waste electrical directive and how design can reduce the impact of and lessen the cost of compliance with. And we got it. We didn't know what to do because now we've got to deliver it. And so that was Eco 3. That was me and Lee. We both did our own consultancy on the side, mainly with EnviroWise. But we ran this little eco design agency, which grew to like 9 people at one point. And I did that for about 10 years. And I love that work. And I really look back with fond memories of that time. And I'm very proud of the way that I left that business. I was very honourable. I didn't take any work with me. I didn't badmouth anybody. I just left in a really kind of clean way. And the reason I left were two things. This was post 2008, so we'd had the bonfire of the Quangos, we'd had the removal of EnviroWise and all of that kind of public sector funding, which was so foolish. It's exactly where we needed to be now. And all of that had happened. So that work had slimmed. So we'd slimmed in proportion. And I started to do more and more work in 2 areas. One, I guess you would call it straight management and innovation consultancy. How do we still be here in 10 years' time? What products do we need to produce? And 2, in brand. So how do we explain who we are and what we do? And Lee was really into kind of like carbon metrics and LCA. And we just had different ways of doing things. Now, I think it's just one of those moments where you think, I'm actually a little bit bored. I'm going to do something slightly different. And told Lee like a year before I left that this was going to happen. And we negotiated a way through that. It's never easy. It's like a divorce, right? It's like a divorce. And I did, and I left there. And then I did the wrong thing next, actually. I went into partnership with a branding agency to be their sustainability arm. Great people, but in reality, I was just part of the trinkets and balls of them winning pitches. Oh yeah, we've got this kind of in house, and so I helped get lots of work in and got no work out of it. And after 4 years, it was like clearly not working. And so that's when I set up, or I resurrected my self-employed consultancy, which we changed the name to Ape.
Why Ape? I suppose it's
a good question, that is, because it created havoc on the website. Ape, number one, well, there's 3 reasons. Firstly, I've always had that anthropoidal, that kind of because I grew up dancing in the 80s, the whole kind of Manchester. I've always had that kind of like apish look about me. Number 2, and more importantly, I was born in 1968, which is a year of the monkey in Chinese horoscope, and it's the monkey's the most disruptive of the characters, and it's the most disruptive year of the most disruptive character, and I really like that kind of disruptive thinking, asking silly questions, and that's why the Gorillaz are called the Gorillaz. Hewlett and Albarn are both 68 monkeys, so they call their band the Gorillaz because of that. And that inspired me, because I used to know Albarn years and years and years and years ago, and I thought, okay, no, there's something here that I like about Ape. And then the final kind of the triumvirate is this relationship between nature, nurture, essentially, and I guess strength. You wouldn't call it aggression, you call it strength. And that mirroring, which is what an ape has, that mirroring reminded me of evolution and revolution, and that's the way that I work. Care. Now let's change something really, really dramatic. So all of those things together made me think, Ape's the right name, and I really like 3 letters. Problem is, Gareth, getting that web address is impossible. And so we went through all of the manifestations, and we ended up with either this is Ape or we are Ape. And I wrote we are Ape down, and it did look a little bit like we rape. And I thought, I'm not going anywhere near that. So it's this is Ape. But when you're on the agenda of a talk and you're down as here's Mark from This is Ape, and I just think, no, clearly not. But yeah, it's a really interesting one. I don't tell that story often enough, so thank you for asking me.
Yes, I must admit I registered the name of my business, Terra Infirma, before I'd tried to spell the web address out or the email address out to anybody, which is actually a nightmare. I wish I'd done
Yeah,
that first. Whereas Ape or This Is Ape is a bit easier than that.
I think we're going to change it to Ape Studios or something, because even with This Is Ape, I'm spelling it. And I'm spelling, you know, it's a frustration. So, yeah, I think it will change.
Yeah. So, what are the big issues you're dealing with at the minute? What's out there in the corporate world from your point of view?
Well, it's a really timely question because it's changed massively. So just before lockdown, I would say that 60% of my work was in innovation, you know, developing products that are fit for a fairer future. I'm not saying they were all good products in as much as building social or environmental regenerative, I guess you'd call it equity. But most of them were. But it was all around, what does the consumer think or the customer think? Which way is the market going? Where is our space to do something good in that? And I love that. I absolutely love that. And it pays really well. And it was a really exciting area, not ostensibly green, but it ran through me like the word Blackpool through a stick of rock. Post lockdown, really fascinating. It's gone back the other way. It's gone to like 60% sustainability, 30% innovation and change, and 10% of my work is presentations and coaching. And probably, I guess you'd call it skills. So right now, the things that I'm working on the most or the most frequently, we do a lot of scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon footprinting. My son, who's got a first-class degree from Sheffield, he does all of that, and he's brilliant. He's way better at it than I am. I'm like 90% kind of guy. Like, we're about there, 800,000 tons. Yep. And I'll say, brilliant, and we'll use that then. And my son Max will say, yeah, but I've not included transmission losses from the energy yet.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, what's that going to add? About 0.5%. Oh, well, we're fine then. And he said, no. He's brilliant. And he's a stickler, you know, where everything has to be done properly. And that's exactly the way it should be.
Yeah.
So we do probably half of our work is a bit less than half is that. I'd say a chunk of it is strategy. So how do we navigate this environmental playground in terms of business? And significantly, what comes up there is green washing, and I call it green cocking. So showing off, peacocking and greenwashing. My good friend Claire came up with that, and I use it but credit it all the time. And then we've also got green hushing, and I think there's an element of green wishing as well to go with greenwashing. So helping companies understand where their strategy should be and how to talk about it without falling foul of the Advertising Standards Authority. Yeah. That's a really big challenge.
So greenwashing, just to interrupt, expand on that.
So it's kind of like you want to do something, you want to be greener, but actually, do you know what? You can't really do it, because if you did it, it would lose your money, or if you did it, you would feel exposed. So you wish you were better. I help people find the confidence to take that first step. So it's a bit distinct from greenwashing, but they overlap for absolute certainty.
Yeah.
Then we do a lot on. Sorry, after you.
Does the innovation work you were doing before, does that help with that sort of persuading people, I suppose, to let go of the side of the swimming pool and try to swim
and kick hard? It does. It's really interesting. Those two skills, it's very hard. You could be forgiven for thinking that the same organization could do both well, but actually, you know, all creativity is imagining a world that hasn't arrived yet. So the innovation piece is always about, how do we imagine a better world? You wouldn't imagine a worse one. So the overlap with sustainability is absolutely huge. Period. And then right now, you know, no one is going to develop a product that harms the planet in the same way that they used to. So now this is, you know, we're moving out of the marketing PR team and into the innovation and business strategy team. And that makes a massive, massive difference.
Yeah. And what other, I suppose we've gone into my next question a bit, is what other frustrations do you find when trying to make change happen within a client organization? Because it can be difficult when you're the outsider to
Yeah,
that change.
it's both difficult and a gift, isn't it? So it's a very well timed question. This is so one of the frustrations I have is that people don't stay in the same organization. They move on. That's amazing because they sometimes take you with you, and that's really good. But having that lack of continuity can be really irritating. My second frustration is it's very rare this happens where the board just do not get it. They still think of this as a nice to, rather than a permission to play, rather than a kind of way of still being here in 30 years. They're not thinking it along those timescales. I find that really, really irritating. It's so rare, but it did pop up weirdly yesterday. Then I get kind of frustrated, and this is a petty one really, but it's we've seen the rush of creative agencies into the green space. And it's like, oh yeah, we're a B Corp now. We do green now.
Yeah.
Actually, without the science, without that knowledge that sits behind it, they're just responding to totems, and that in itself is, I think, quite dangerous actually, and can lead us down the wrong route, and can lead us into a position where new products, new services are being developed that are not fit for purpose and that are not fit for the systems that we have. So that's a growing frustration, and of course that could sound like sour. That could sound like I'm concerned that the market's getting busier. I'm not. I love competition, but I am concerned about clients being taken down the wrong route. And I've seen this 2 or 3 times recently, where the client has been led down the wrong route by a blended agency or someone that does a bit of sustainability and a bit of a branding agency essentially, and they've got a great idea and it sounds fantastic on paper or on the web, but when it comes to delivering it, the science isn't there to back it up.
Yeah.
So that's a massive frustration. And then I guess my overriding frustration is one around the biggest challenge we face by a logarithmic factor is climate change and the associated collapse of biodiversity. Nothing comes close. Nothing. And yet we see a focus on the more totemic issues, which are really important, but actually this is the most important thing. And it's got to the point where the amount of times I've seen the carbon funnel, the myopia of carbon diagram, where people are like, oh, but you've not thought about food and it's outside, and you've not thought about biodiversity. No, all of those things are dependent upon a stable climate. Every single one of those is about carbon. And I get frustrated that we've got this almost friendly fire between people who should be all headed in the same direction and like to have a pop at each other. The regenerative agriculturists versus the vegans, the plastic campaigners versus the carbon campaigners. Yeah. Let's just celebrate what we share and move in that area. And then my last one, I tell you, I only had 2. This is, I think, my 5th, and this is a massive issue. This may resonate with you. We have spent the last, 25 years trying to scare people into a better way of operating. We've shown the stick, and we needed to have shown the carrot. The world would be better if it looked like. And so we've actually got nowhere in many ways by having this very negative approach, this fear-mongering approach to sustainability, rather than, hey, the future could look like this. And I think that's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, just rewinding a little bit through your answer there to totemic issues. So we talk about things like single-use plastics as a totemic issue.
For one example, absolutely. But it could be, it could be that we focus on dairy as a single use, as a single focus. Really important, but at the same time, let's have a bigger look. Yeah. I'm the first to say, like, single-use plastics are absolutely ridiculous. We need to remove them where possible. But I'm also a firm believer that there's no such thing as a bad material. but there are really broken systems that material fits into. So I've got a much more carbon scientific focus on these things rather than a solely emotional focus.
Yeah. Yeah, my view on plastics is it's a bit like the definition of a weed being a plant in the wrong place. If plastic's only a problem if it's in the wrong place. It's almost the fact that plastics are such good materials that make them a problem.
Exactly the same with CFCs.
Yeah.
When CFCs were invented, they were demonstrated. I can't remember the inventor's name, but about 1922, and he demonstrated this super safe propellant refrigerant by breathing it in, not dying, and breathing it out on a flame, and it not bursting. Creating a flamethrower. These were because the alternative was butane. We were using butane and pentane at that time. Ammonia as well, which is a horrible refrigerant. And you think that's incredible. It just hangs around forever, right? It's not a bad material. It's just in the wrong place.
Yes. Yeah. My view on the totemic issues, for what it's worth, is that often the general public can grasp those much more readily than, climate change is somewhat ephemeral. You have to, you have to believe, take a lot more on faith in some ways, whereas the iconic picture of the seahorse with the cotton bud from National Geographic, as soon as you see that, it's wrong. So it's much more tangible and easy to get. So
and you can photograph Chris Jordan, the American photographer and conceptual artist, utterly brilliant at demonstrating the impact of plastic on birds and sea life. Absolutely right. The bigger impact is through climate change. However, you can't photograph that. It's really hard.
But sometimes those totemic issues are a nice stepping stone. Or
they're a good way in.
Yeah. Or also one of my clients, now retired, always put it that you have to make sure you get those little totemic issues right, or people won't believe you on the other stuff. So it's almost like it's almost like an item of faith.
Do you know what we could actually see there into a conversation around polarism, around polarization, and around the alternative truth conversation? They're very good. The far right, they're very good. All of the Prison Planet and all of the Breitbart, they're very good at finding two or three things that are demonstrably true, and then saying, well, we were right on that, so everything else must be right. And it's exactly the same, but in a different, with a different flip. Really interesting conversation. That's our biggest challenge right now, is not how we solve climate change from a scientific perspective, is how we shine a light on the lies around polarization and the WEF global reset, which is believed by so many intelligent people. I find it staggering.
Yes, it is quite extraordinary, and I find it amusing. But when you have government ministers repeating sort of 15-minute city conspiracy theories, which is for various reasons one of my, I'm just always intriguingly baffled by the way that somebody can take the idea that you'd have some decent shops and a doctor's surgery near your house to some sort of enforced slavery. But
and how you would only be able to shop on a Tuesday within a certain tagged area. I mean, literally, it's and then we move into that whole kind of digital currency debate, and everything has been bound up. That this is the biggest threat we face. This level of misinformation. I find it staggering.
Yes, and as you say, they're only sold in selection packs. You don't buy conspiracy theories individually. You seem to have to go for the set, which is
you're absolutely right. Although the one that used to sit outside of it was the flat Earth one, that's now being reeled inside of this kind of belief system.
All right, I haven't seen that yet. I did give a little ironic cheer when chemtrails made a resurgence, because that was such a 1980s conspiracy theory that it seemed to die a death for a while, and then post COVID it seemed to get a new life.
Yeah, we're all seeded, aren't we? I mean, it's the whole level of disbelief, mistruth, and lying is the single biggest threat that we face, not just on climate, but as you say, on developing really effective local services that we could all access but aren't limited to. It's just bonkers. Anyway, we've given them enough oxygen.
So, your latest book, You Can't Make Money from a Dead Planet. What was the inspiration for it?
That's a great question. That is. It was multi. So firstly, I felt that although business gets a really bad rap, sometimes understandably, my general view is although business has created most of the world's problems, business and religion, most of the world's problems, business is the enterprise is the answer to most of those problems. It's the only thing that can solve them. So I firmly believe in the power of enterprise to do good. And I'm irritated that it's gone so far wrong, right? I'm not saying capitalism is perfect at the moment. In fact, they go into this in the book. So I wanted to say something that was pro good business, number one. Number two, I think this is a very personal thing. I think I'd grown my expertise in other areas, and my first two books were about disruptive thinking and presentation skills. And I didn't want to be just that guy, right? I'm an environmental scientist. That's what I've trained in. And so I wanted to kind of, and then maybe this is an age thing as well, but reclaim the authority that comes with having been there at the beginning, really. And as we age, for the first half of our life, we take on things. We acquire as many things as we can, experiences, property, product, partners, whatever it is. And the second half of our life, we feel to buttress ourselves. Second half of our life, we feel confident enough to let go of those things and to become, as Ram Dass says, to become nobody, but to be comfortable in your authority. And I felt that it was part of that stripping away of the buttress roots that I'd created around me as I was maturing. I'm 56 this year, and I'm really comfortable holding the authority that I've gained rather than trying to hold authority that I aspire to hold. Yeah. And I think part of it was that, coming back to that. And I felt that there was a really big need to have my book is a very, if you pick it up, I potentially do myself out of work, right? I teach you how to do everything from writing the strategy to doing your scope 1 to 3, to developing a regenerative business approach, to offsetting or moving into quality carbon removals. Well, I kind of like, if you buy the book, you probably don't need to buy me, which is maybe a little foolish, but I felt that I wanted to do something that gave a whole answer. That's it.
Yes. But there's nothing more frustrating on a book that you're just reading and thinking, but what do you want me to do? Whereas your book very definitely does it. The one thing that really jumped out at me as because obviously I've been working in the same sphere for a long time, so a lot of what you were explaining was for somebody who hadn't come to it before, like your scopes 1, 2, and 3, etc. But the one thing that really jumped out at me was you propose using meditation as part of strategy development.
Yeah.
So where did that come from, or can you develop that thought a bit more?
Of course, yeah. I mean, when you say it like that, I sound like a nutter. But again, it's part of this journey to kind of finding yourself. And I've built this into my workshops and into my presentation skills training for years. If I'm running a workshop in America on how to come up with new, health drinks or something, then we build a bit of meditation in. Now, I don't always mean like sitting there in mudra doing Om. I don't always mean that. But when we're in theta brainwave, so when we're awake and we're thinking, we're in beta brainwave. And then if we're in awake but receiving, we tend to be in alpha brainwave. Then when we're asleep, we're in delta brainwave. The frequencies of the brainwaves. This is not me making it up. This is science. The bit between alpha and delta is theta. And that's the brainwave where we're our most productive in terms of ideas, not just quantity, also quality. Now, we get to theta in many, many ways. And you'll know this. You'll be cycling through Newcastle and you'll think, did I go past the Life Centre? I must have done because I'm here, right? And so it's when you're lost in flow or thought, when you're in the shower, you know
Uh,
where all your
I
bits
was
are.
going to mention the shower. Is this why you have good ideas when you're
It's
washing your
exactly
hair?
that. It's exactly that because it's
Yeah.
become a ritual and and you know where everything is and you don't have to think about it. And it's the bit before you fall asleep. So, and it's a bit when you're doing the gardening, when you don't have to do om to get to theta, but meditation is a really fast way to it. And that's when we're at our most creative. And Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb, or actually he stole the idea, but you know,
Yeah.
we'll credit him with it.
I
So the
live in
inventor of
Newcastle. I have to say it's Thomas Swan or
there
people
you go.
like that.
And Edison arguably did more harm than good by reducing the life of a light bulb, right?
Yeah.
But when he was trying to solve a problem, whatever that problem might be, he would seek out meditation on purpose. He would have a little meditation chair and a table next to it, and he would write down the question he was trying to solve, and he would meditate. But he would meditate with a metal cup between his ankles and a coin trapped between his knees. And as he meditated, he'd move from beta into alpha, through theta, and ultimately into delta, where he would fall asleep. His legs would relax, his knees would part slightly, the penny would drop, and that's where the phrase comes from,
Ah,
into the metal cup, wake him up, and he would write down whatever he was thinking about.
yeah.
So it's a well-known approach to having better ideas, but it's with the wellness revolution that we've had, and with talk about breath work and meditation being almost cliched. It can make people go, what? I've got to do what? But we do it already.
Yeah. And how do your clients take to that? If you're working with a company, is there awkward pause at that moment or
As ever, there are many different people
yeah.
within a company, and some people love it. Some people need some persuasion, but I've never done it. And someone's come up to me afterwards and said, "Well, I liked it all apart from that bit. That bit was
Yeah.
rubbish. Never had that at all." Increasingly, there's an enhanced appetite for this stuff. So I teach qigong, which is Tai Chi is a form of qigong. It's a 5,000-year-old system of movement and meditation based on ancient Chinese practices. And I'll often do a bit of qigong in my workshops just to get after lunch to get people moving and thinking differently. And I build in a meditation into that. And interestingly, when I started that, I was kind of on my own. I'd be like, anyone done it? No. Would you trust me? Yes. Now, when I say, should we do a bit of qigong? I get people going, yeah, well, yeah, I love qigong. Yeah, I'd love to do that. So I think we are, in terms of managers and leaders, these are really weird words. I think we're beginning to see some maturation around the benefits of different ways of thinking within an organization. And part of that is to do with mental health, absolutely. And part of that is to do with staying ahead and innovation, absolutely. And I love the fact that they're touching each other.
Yeah. Excellent. We've talked about a huge range of issues, so I think we need to start to come to conclusion. But what piece of advice would you give somebody new to the industry, say joining your business or something? What would be your core, whether it's a practical piece of advice or a piece of philosophy to follow?
There are many, right? So firstly, people buy people. So be nice, deliver on what you say you're going to deliver. Be honest, really simple. The days of running a business along a blueprint of The Apprentice, where you're just being nasty for money, they're gone. That thankfully, kindness is a competitive advantage, and we begin to see that. Number two, use science. It's free, it's available. Build it into every single thing that you do. Also understand the consumer, and that's my third thing. The consumer, the end consumer, is changing. the way we categorize them is changing. We used to talk about ABC1, or we used to talk about Telegraph or Wall Street Times reading. We would try and categorize them those broad ways. None of that works anymore. This is all around belief system. I've got a lovely consumer understanding model that is belief, aspiration, behavior. And those three concentric circles will take you to a deeper understanding of the consumer than frankly anything else. So that's where I tend to sit. So they're my three top tips. Don't be scared to leave somewhere. Don't be scared to go, oh, do you know what? I've done a year, 3 years, whatever it is. It doesn't matter anymore. It used to be that, if you had lots of jobs on your CV, you were clearly a problem. It's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a really good thing, I think.
Yes. Although, as you said before, one of the challenges as a consultant is when people move on, and that's the person you had your relationship with. I know that all too well to my cost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's a contradiction there in what I've said, but it's not a contradiction. Reality, it's a reality.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for all of that, Mark. I think we covered a huge range of topics, and I certainly learned a lot, including the origin of the phrase "when the penny drops," which I might look at in more detail. But yeah, thank you for joining us today.
Honestly, it's an absolute joy. The work that you do, the podcast that you hold, and your own journey has a center of gravity that pulls people with you. So we've both been in this a long time. It's good that we're still going.
Great. Okay. Thanks.